Thank you. Since I've been working for about 15 years in academia, I've always been very passionate about how to make the things we develop within technical realm bring into the business. By education, I'm an environmental engineer, and I'm mostly focusing on water and wastewater engineering. And over the period of 15 years, I've been engaged in many activities helping to bring scientific finding into the business. So that's why during my presentation, I would like to show some examples of where the Latvia is standing in field of green technology right now, showing some of the examples and also coming up with some kind of conclusions how I see we should proceed to be more visible in green technology at the global scale. Just to start with a very simple statement, that sustainability could be very difficult without profitability. Well, this is quite a provocative statement, but the idea is like this. If you take this conventional wastewater treatment plant, which is using aeration, it consumes a lot of energy and it generates a lot of waste. So for the city like Riga, you would pay about 4 million per year to run it. If you turn into the green technologies, using anaerobic treatment and recovering phosphorus, you would generate electricity, you get nutrients, and you gain about 2 million per year. So I think this is a very clear statement that green technologies are profitable. So it's not just about the saving environment, but it's about also making money. So where this money can be generated? You know, famous problem of eutrophication. We are not happy about our Baltic Sea, so you get this blue algae growing there. So what would happen if we take phosphorus out from the wastewater and convert into the struvite? This on the left here. And then you can sell it to the countries which are having shortages of phosphorus. So these technologies are available. They are developed and they are actually prototyped. So the question is why the market is not taking them, or they are taking very slowly. And in fact, if you have this phosphorus recovery, then you also address very critical problem in agriculture, because we will run out of the phosphorus in coming 50 years. So I think that it's one example showing that green technologies can be not only the ones which are saving environment, but also they're stimulating economical growth in several countries. And in fact, if you look at the data, green technology business, both in renewable energy, waste management, transport, are growing about 10% per year. In some countries, even 15%. I think that Norway and Nordic countries in general are a very good example. Look at this graph. So for example, Finland, they have generated about 50,000 jobs in the last few years in green technology, and this number is going to double in next decade. So, of course, Latvia is not still there, but during my presentation I show you that this is indeed we have a great potential, and Latvia now is on the way turning from, let's say, only sporadic cooperation between industry and university to more long-term cooperation. And Green Incubator, in which I'm a member of the board, is a good example of that. So, what is the landscape of green technologies in Latvia? During the last years, there have been several supports provided on all kind of technology readiness level. We have, for example, we have small companies. They don't have really money available now to invest in long term, but there are some clusters, like Clean Tech Cluster, which is coordinating activities of these companies so they become more visible out there, so they can go outside and present them on the national level. There are also some activities like competence centers. Of course, they are so far, they're looking only at the short term. But what is happening there, that they are getting additional funding to generate more research and development investments. And I think this is the very important trend. And of course, then we have a green incubator and other incubators which are focusing on technologies more and more. So we are kind of shifting away from startup as only the startup for IT to more technology-based, and green incubator is one example of that. So how universities are doing? We are cooperating quite a lot. And actually our scientific areas like robotics and material science, which Latvia is quite famous about, are very nicely fitting with the overall idea of green technologies, because these technologies can be exactly used to generate technologies which are more sustainable. So at the moment, again, coming back to, let's say, last few years, we're talking mostly about, of course, cooperation with the big companies, and all kind of cooperation we will have is expertise. We have a joint project, pilot testing. So far we've been more focusing on this more kind of spot contracts between companies and universities. So what are the areas we've been focusing at? In green technologies, I would say major two: energy saving and waste recovery. Just to prove by exact examples of this cooperation. You know, we, as a university, we help business to come up with energy audits for their building so they can save some money on heating costs. We cooperate also with the big companies like electricity providers to reduce the energy loss in transition lines. Or we cooperate with the companies which are producers of, in this case, Valmiera glass producing fibers for materials, and with help of universities, they introduce recycling system to recover heavy metals. In this case, they save some money to invest in new products, and they also get rid of the penalties they otherwise should pay for putting this sludge outside in the landfill. We are not only working with local companies. I think there are two good examples. Through framework projects, our universities are actively working with the big brands like Airbus or Volvo. You know, these companies are really going into the green technology field. This is the example of Airbus, because they are developing a new type of material using composite structures to reduce the weight of their vehicles, and the same goes to the Volvo company. So our scientists working with them closely, not only actually in the development stage of the vehicles, but also in production stage. For example, we have a project with Daimler, which is producing Mercedes-Benz cars, and they are introducing a completely new energy reduction technology. You know, when you move robots, you have some energy loss because of a friction, so they're recovering this energy, and in this sense, they become more sustainable. Again, example from the local municipality. They are using energy recovering from heat system using wood chips, so they are able to save about 20% of their cost just because they're recovering the heat which is coming from the wood chip heat house. So these are actual results of cooperation so far. And what is interesting lately, we see that there are more and more startup companies approaching universities, asking them to help in developing their prototypes. This is one example of, actually, this is a Swedish company, startup company, which approached university and asked, can you help us to develop this prototype so we can later on put it in the market? So the idea is that they're using biogas cleaning filters to produce biogas which can be used by cars. And at the end of this project, actually, they're filling in the car already with this biogas, and this company is starting their business right now. So it's another example of cooperation, but of course, there are many technologies which are at the early stage yet. So, and it should take some time before they go into the market, but just to give one example, using the waste from the lignocellulose, like you have food chips and also have hay, and this can be used to convert this sugar, what you have in the waste, into the butanol or ethanol, new type of, let's say, alcohol. And then also working with the companies using their waste. For example, we have one project with a milk-producing company, which is converting now the waste from the milk production into biogas, and we have developed technology which allows to increase the yield of the biogas production by 20%. And then finally, one example from cooperation with the big drug producer, Greendex. So they're also looking at more sustainable solutions, like shifting from using very energy-intensive wastewater treatment technology towards using fungi. Yeah, the ones which you find in the forest, they have some enzymes which can be used later on to treat very recalcitrant substances which are coming up from this pharmaceutical industry. So what are the challenges today? I think that there's the movement towards more and more cooperation between industry and the research sector. But of course, the major constraint is related to the long-term investments, because these cooperation, more or less, they are kind of on the project base. So what we need is long-term cooperation. And another challenge is that when you talk about green technologies, in many cases, they are the large-scale technologies. For example, energy grid or transport system or wastewater treatment. This is a responsibility of municipality. And municipalities, sometimes they are too slow to adopt new technologies. So these kind of solutions we have to address. And one way how universities are doing this, they are trying to bring the technologies to the prototype and demonstration level. So basically, one thing is if you see the technology in the lab, but then you can generate a prototype or the pilot and then bring it exactly to the place, to the factory, so they can install it and test them in a full scale. And this is a good example how then these ideas can be disseminated to the other end users. And again, talking about universities, I think the attitude towards how we educate engineers, in case of Riga Technical University, is changing now. We realize that students, they need more skills in business development, and in particularly in developing new type of products. For example, now at university, we have a special lab which helps students to develop prototypes, real prototypes, which then later on could be taken up by the startup companies originating from the university or from other businesses. So now, I think that what happens during the last decade is that we kind of shifting not only from having this contract between the companies, but also going into this realm, which is universities as a business creators. So I think the Green Incubator is an example of that universities not only can support companies in doing business, but actually create business itself. So Green Incubator, it's an example of this. Of course, this is the only Green Incubator in Latvia. Of course, it was a really short period since it started to really operate in a full speed. But the idea was very actually old. It started in 2010. There are many people behind it, how to push it forward, but the overall principle was taken from Ideon Science Park in Sweden. And then after some time, of course, with the support of Norway and the Ministry of Economics in Latvia, we started this idea, and there's been many changes in the staff and so on. But then finally, since 2 years, this incubator is running. And I think this is quite a unique project. and I tell you why. First of all, this is the, I would say, only incubator which support hardware technologies. Because, of course, when you talk about incubation, we mostly think about startups producing, apps on the mobile phones. But for technologies like green technology, the time for coming from idea to the project is much longer. So I think this was a great idea to have support on early stage. The second is that the incubator provided mentoring. You have students, and students, they are very open. They want to do their business, but they don't know how to do it. So what Green Incubator was doing and still doing, it helps the students to learn how to do it. And very important point is that it's not just about technologies. It's about the team. So I'm happy that in among the leaders of this Green Incubators, we have people with experience who can give really practical suggestions to the students and the startup companies so they can feel confident and they can shape the way they think their technologies would be promoted. And of course, I think the structure that two universities, the big universities, are engaged, and just to say that 80% of science is actually concentrated in Riga. So I think you cannot disregard this as a really science hub to develop startup companies. And of course, that we have independent international board with people knowing exactly how the business can be generated is very important. Of course, it's running only for 2 years, but imagine, during these 2 years, we have almost 400 applications. So it's like every second day you have an application. I think it shows how eager, how, let's say, hungry students are to start their businesses. And of course, not everyone passed. It was quite, I think, harsh selection. And at this point, we can say we have 25, 24 companies incubated and they're running, I think, to the next stage, which is getting the accelerator funds. So they are competing already in the global scale, like in a climate launch. And also they have caused interest from many investors. So we have about 11 of these companies are actually working to attract investors on the next stage. And the 5 already have got this. So, I mean, and again, we're talking about 2 years, and we talk about a couple of million euros so far. What are the ideas and what are the, let's say, good examples of this green incubator? I think I want to show one idea, and then I will show some, let's say, company which has already attracted a lot of attention. This is the one, Sapro glue. So in lakes, you have a lot of deposits, which are from, generated over a period of long time. So you can take these deposits and convert them into the glue. So in this sense, you clean the lake and you have ecological glue. So this is one example, one company which has actually developed a prototype, and it seems to be very successful. Another example is the company Alina, which is producing new type of environmental friendly antibiotic additives. So basically getting away from biocides and heavy metals, using for protection of buildings, but moving to environmentally friendly. And they actually already have nominated as a winner of sustainable building in one of the innovation awards in Denmark. But what I think is very important about this company is the people behind. If you see this lady, Solvita, she might, if she wouldn't go into the green incubator, she might continue to be a scientist, which is good. I mean, for universities, it's important. But because of the green incubator, she has found a way to become an entrepreneur. Now she travels around the world and tries to sell the product. So this was really a place where it was motivating new people, new scientists, and students to get on entrepreneurship track. Another example, I think we are going globally. Like Europe is also looking at the innovation scheme. They have so-called EIT, Innovation Institute, and they are very competitive. And one of the ideas, which is about using light to treat water instead of using chemicals, has got in the climate launch pad final of EIT and was selected as among best 10 ideas in Europe. Okay, I'm finishing, right? So, and I think I will come just to the conclusion if you have so limited time. So the first thing I would like to say is that the green technologies, green tech, is gaining momentum now in Latvia. So we're shifting actually the mode, how we operated before, working only with the big companies, towards more working with the startups. What is really needed now, I think, Latvia needs a long-term support or seed fund to support early-stage science startups. If green technology incubator will be over, there will be no particular funds available. So if we want to continue, I'm really looking forward to cooperation between Nordic countries and Latvia, so to understand that this is very important if we want to support green ideas in general. And of course, we need to work more with the universities and with industry. But to end up my presentation, I would like to state that Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible till it's done. So believe me, that after 5 years, there will be one company which is coming out from green incubator. You said, oh, okay, it will never make it. But they will get in somewhere, and they will become rich and famous, and then everybody would like to say, I was part of this story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have a question for one short, we have a time for one short question if there is in the room. If not, then we're going to postpone this to the networking session. If no, then thank you.